Hello students, welcome to the YouTube channel of Montbretia. Once again I am here with Standard 10 English Supplementary books Footprints Without Feet, and I am taking the chapter A Triumph of Surgery. In this chapter, as I have already told you, that it is the story of a dog, Tricky, and his mistress, Mrs. Pumphrey. Tricky was overfed by her mistress, and due to which he has to be hospitalized for a fortnight. Fortnight means for 15 days. And the doctor, Mr. Heriot, has taken the charge to make him well. So when Tricky was taken to the surgery means for the hospital, the household dogs search around Tricky. He sees them lying motionless. Means when Tricky was taken to the hospital, other dogs were also there. They came and started sniffing on the new dog, but Tricky lies lifeless. So the other dogs did not seem any interest on him and they run away. A separate bed was made for Tricky, although the mistress of that is Mrs. Pumphrey has already sent the dogs separate bed, separate bowl for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, different types of coats, means dresses. But in the hospital, he has been treated according to the other dogs. So a separate bed has been made for Tricky in a warm, loose box. For 2 days, no food is given to him, but plenty of water. On the second day, he starts taking some interest in, in his surroundings. He started looking here and there with the other dogs. And on the third day, he begins to whimper. Whimper means he started barking, responding to something. When he hears the dog in the yard, Tricky starts taking a walk around the bowls, licking casually inside one or two of them. But other dogs come together to take the advantage of first eating, because the first comes will eat maximum. But Tricky afraid to go for with them, and so when the other dogs goes, he started licking one or two like this. Tricky's progress is rapid. He has no medical treatment of any kind. He runs about the dog, joining their friendly barking. He started fighting for the food, for the share in the food. Dr. Harriet tells Mrs. Pumphrey that Tricky is not in danger anymore and is recovering very fast. On the other hand, Mrs. Pumphrey thought that Tricky is very ill, so she started sending different types of wine, brandy, eggs. So the doctor and his team tempted to keep Tricky as a permanent guest, because those things which has been sent by Mrs. Pumphrey for Tricky, they used to relish very nicely, doctor and its team. So first time Tricky was seen that he was involved in different kind of physical exercises, with fighting with the dogs, started running with the dogs, and even started catching rats in the houses. Mrs. Pumphrey used to send those eggs, brandy, dozen of eggs, and the doctor informed that Tricky was recovered and Mrs. Pumphrey can come and collect him, because the Dr. Heriot was very innocent person. He did not wanted to bluff Mrs. Pumphrey. So he informed at last after 14 days that your dog has been cured, come and take him. Now, within 2 weeks, Tricky was totally well. And it has been transformed into a muscular dog. He is stretching out in great bounds. Stretching out with great bounds means he started jumping from one place to another, which he never has done in his life while he was staying with Mrs. Pumphrey. When Tricky sees his mistress, Tricky remembered. Dogs are very loyal. So Tricky remembers his mistress. He leaps and sails into her lap. He jumps onto the lap of Mrs. Pumphrey. And now Tricky has become so heavy, so muscular that Mrs. Pumphrey has to also come back. So as the car moves away with Tricky, with eyes, means tears in the eyes of Mrs. Pumphrey, Mrs. Pumphrey leans out of the window. Her lips tremble and tears shine in the eyes. She says, "Oh, Mr. Harriot, how can I ever thank you? Really, this is a triumph of surgery," because Mrs. Pumphrey said some surgical activity has been done with Tricky, then only he has been cured. So this is the end of the chapter. In this, you have to go through few of the questions. The questions are: how did Mr. Harriot treat Tricky in the hospital? Why is doctor and his teammates are tempted to keep Tricky as on a permanent guest? And do you think that Tricky was happy to go home? What do you think will happen after this? These are the questions you must write down in your copy. The last question is you have to write by your own thought, and keep ready for the regular classes. Thank you.